George R.R. Martin is very careful as to how he releases information about A Song of Ice and Fire. Very little is given out these days, especially given the fact that as The Winds of Winter has not yet come out, there is very much a need for secrecy in terms of him keeping future plot beats very close to the vest. With that said, he has made some exceptions to this general rule in the past. We got a post about Casterly Rock, the castle of the Lannisters, meant to kind of detract from the image that the show had created for people and establish what it might be like in the Winds of Winter. And in the summer of 2024, we get a very interesting and detailed blog post about dragons and how they work, both physiologically and magically. A lot in this post deals with not only the past of Ice and Fire and how dragons have played a role in the histories thereof, and even looking at House of the Dragon, the inaccuracies that that show might have, but additionally, there's specific mention made of the Winds of Winter and even A Dream of Spring, and the role that dragons might play therein. So, today I want to analyze this blog post and go into what I think it might entail for the Winds of Winter. To set up the context surrounding this post, summer of 2024 was a strange time to be in A Song of Ice and Fire fan. Some very optimistic people who will remain nameless thought that Winds could be coming soon, and there were a number of positive signs in this direction, one being the release of these new covers for the series, and another being this post in and of itself. As I said, Martin really doesn't tend to do lore posts like this. This is also in the midst of House of the Dragon Season 2. Martin was being especially active on his blog as he was soon to leave for a trip to Europe, where he really wouldn't be able to post. And additionally, this is in the aftermath of the fourth episode of House of the Dragon's second season, The Red Dragon and the Gold, that being the big dragon fight over Rook's Rest, so Martin thought, hey, it's a good time to post some dragon lore. The first part of this post details dragons in fantasy generally and begins to draw contrast between those that preceded it and George Martin's dragons in and of themselves. He draws attention to the fact that Ice and Fire are not the first dragons he's written about. The Ice Dragon and The Way of Crossing Dragon were two previous stories he'd written about dragons, and he draws specific contrast to dragons of Tolkien, as well as Aragon and how to train your dragon, before specifically getting into the lore of dragons in the world of Ice and Fire, especially comparing to both the show House of the Dragon, and at least one inconsistency there, and these dragons of literature and film past. Also, something I want to draw attention to, because Martin is as much of a nerd as I am, and I love him for that, is that he spends like 5 paragraphs complaining about incorrect dragon sigils, specifically that Game of Thrones started out with the sigil correct and then accidentally added 2 more legs, and then this 4-legged sigil, which is incorrect to dragons and Ice and Fire, was adopted into House of the Dragon as well, and now we have this weird situation where like Rhaenyra's team has this incorrect sigil, but Aegon's Sunfire sigil still has the correct number of legs. It's really weird and kind of fun that Martin drew attention to it. There's one section here that's very crucial to the lore of dragons in Ice and Fire and the Winds of Winter, so I'm going to read that out here. Quote from this blog post of July 2024. My dragons do not talk. They're relatively intelligent, but they are still beasts. They bond with men, some when, and the why and the how of that and how it came to be will eventually be revealed in more detail in The Winds of Winter and A Dream of Spring and some in Blood and Fire. Parentheses, Sept and Barth got most of it right. Like wolves and bears and lions, dragons can be trained, but never entirely tamed. They're always going to be dangerous. Some are wilder and more willful than others. They are individuals, they have personalities, and they tend to reflect the personalities of their riders, thanks to the bonds they share. They do not care about gold or gems no more than any tiger would, unless their rider was obsessed with the shiny stuff, and even then. Dragons need food. They need water too, but they have no gills. They need to breathe. Some say that Smaug slept for 60 years beneath the lonely mountain before Bilbo and the dwarves woke him up. Dragons born of Valyria cannot do that. They are creatures of fire, and fire needs oxygen. A dragon could dip into the ocean and scoop up a fish, perhaps, but they'd fly right up again. If held underwater too long, they would drown, just like any other land animal. My dragons are predators, carnivores who like their meat well done. They can and will hunt their own prey, but they're also territorial. They have lairs. As creatures of the sky, they like mountaintops and volcanic mountains best of all. These are creatures of fire, and the cold, dank caverns that other fantasists house their pets in are not for mine. Man-made dwellings, like the stables of Dragonstone and the towers atop the Valyrian Freehold and the Dragon Pit of King's Landing, are acceptable and often come with men bringing them food. If those are not available, young dragons will find their own lairs and defend them fiercely. My dragons are creatures of the sky. They fly and can cross mountains and plains, cover hundreds of miles, but they don't unless their riders take them there. They are not nomadic. During the heyday of Valyria, there were 40 dragon riding families with hundreds of dragons amongst them. But aside from our Targaryens, all of them stayed close to the Freehold and in the lands of the long summer. From time to time, a dragon rider might visit Volantis or another Valyrian colony, even settle there for a few years, but never permanently. Think about it. If dragons were nomadic, they would have overrun half of Essos, and the Doom would have only killed a few of them. Similarly, the dragons of Westeros seem seldom wander far from Dragonstone. Elsewise, after 300 years, we'd have dragons all over the realm, and every noble house would have a few. 3 wild dragons mentioned in Fire and Blood have lairs on Dragonstone. The rest can be found in the Dragon Pit of King's Landing or the deep caverns under the Dragonmont. Luke flies Arax to Storm's End and Jace to Winterfell, yes, but the dragons would not have flown there on their own, save under very special circumstances. You won't find dragons hunting in the Riverlands, or the Reach, or the Vale, or roaming the Northlands, or the Mountains of Dorne. Fantasy needs to be grounded. It's not simply a license to do anything you like. Smog and Toothless may both be dragons, but they should never be confused. Ignore canon, and the world you've created comes apart like tissue paper. That last part was even more pointed than I remembered it on initial read, and I think after the butterfly post, the actual kind of message behind this is very much laid bare. Specifically, that last entire section about dragons' travel patterns and not being nomadic, that's very pointed at the exclusion of Nettles, who we know is one of Martin's favorite characters from the time of the Dance of the Dragons, and the fact that Sheepstealer is apparently just wandering the Vale as a dragon. It does make sense, as he says, specifically that dragons, had they been nomadic, would not have gone extinct or near it with the doom of Valyria. But overall, I think it's very pointed at House of the Dragon in a way that maybe we weren't willing to acknowledge at the time. Before delving into the Winds of Winter, there's a specific historical note that I'd like to make. Dragons, Worms, and Wyverns, Their Unnatural History is an ancient tome, not ancient, it's like 200 years old, written by Septon Barth. It feels ancient because most of the copies were destroyed by King Baelor the Blessed during his fairly mad reign. Tyrion has read a bit of it and passed that knowledge on to Aegon and Jon Connington, but this book is seemingly growing in importance. Septon Barth is mentioned by name in this blog post as being mostly right, so I think it bears examination as to what exactly he thought of dragons. Specifically, he theorized that blood mages of Valyria used wyverns to create dragons somehow, that these are not naturally occurring creatures, but rather they were engineered by man. This is a claim that is considered unlikely by most maesters, so knowing that Barth is probably right about things does kind of lend this a bit more credence. Additionally, Barth's other main claim is that dragons' gender is as mutable as flame. There is no such thing as a male dragon or a female dragon in the way that we know of characters in Westeros, specifically given the fact that they are these magical beings and they can seemingly reproduce on their own, even, it seems like. But going back, the main part of this post that signals the future of Ice and Fire for me is the first paragraph that I read, specifically detailing dragon bonding. This is a very interesting process. It is clear that there is some magical bond between a dragon and their rider. This is why only one human can ride a dragon at a time, and a human can only ride one individual dragon. You don't see Daemon hopping on both Vhagar and Caraxes. He's just got Caraxes. It's interesting to note that more will be revealed about this process in The Winds of Winter and A Dream of Spring, as this is a direct kind of deviation from what we have in the show. In the show, nobody else claims a dragon. Daenerys just hops on Drogon and then suddenly she can ride him. It's pretty cool. in the book, Drogon's claiming is this kind of very expressly magical moment where we see a very real bond become forged between him and Daenerys in the Dragon Pit. She is taking an active role. She has the whip in hand, and she is actively driving him into the sky. And their bond is forged there, but it's not perfectly forged, as Daenerys' next chapter, Daenerys 10, A Dance with Dragons, goes into her kind of psychic state there and further refines that bond and who she is as a Targaryen. Where this begins to deviate from the television show is the fact that no other dragons are claimed in the TV show. Yeah, Jon kind of hops on Rhaegal a time or two, but I mean, after the Battle of Winterfell, he really doesn't use him that much. And even in the Battle of Winterfell, not really getting anything significant there. No attention is drawn to this bond between Rhaegal and Jon. In fact, the only significant moment we see between Jon and a dragon that I would call a character moment comes during season 7 between Jon and Drogon. This is very different in the books. Rhaegal would not be so casual about it. Jon being able to ride this dragon is much more of a big deal, if indeed he does end up riding a dragon. I also always think it's funny that for Rhaegal's death, Jon just happened to not be riding him, because he would definitely die if he'd gotten shot 3 times by a scorpion bolt. But I guess the writers just kind of forgot that Jon had started riding Rhaegal. With that said, the fact that we're going to learn more about bonds in the Winds of Winter does signal not only that we're going to learn more about Daenerys' bond with Drogon, but I think we're going to see other individuals bond with Rhaegal and Viserion. For my money, I think they are going to be a kind of 2 separate instances. Specifically, I think that a viewpoint character is going to bond to one of them, and a non-viewpoint character is going to bond to the other. I think there are a number of interesting candidates for each that I'm now going to go over. Let's do a quick dragon dating mini game. Let's discuss Rhaegal first. I think there are 2 primary candidates who could end up riding this dragon, and as fate would have it, one of them is a viewpoint character, one of them is not. I think only one of them will. I don't think that one of them is going to die and the other is going to pick up the mantle, but both of them have a connection to this dragon's namesake. Daenerys named Rhaegal after her brother Rhaegar, which I think is pretty obvious. Both of these candidates are supposedly fathered by Rhaegar, being Jon Snow and Aegon Targaryen, Aegon the Sixth, young Griff. Young Griff is the first one to discuss, as I think he's less likely. He's the Mummer's dragon. I think that his story is stronger if he's just supported by the political machines of Westeros, the common people, the faith, all this happening, rather than having a dragon of his own. I think that this being a very lopsided conflict does steer into Daenerys being someone who has the capability of taking the throne, but people don't really want her to at that point. I think that's much more compelling for an arc for her. So Aegon could end up taking Rhaegal, and it could be interesting to see. That bond could be observed through the characters surrounding him, like Jon Connington, like Arianne. But overall, I think, especially given the fact that Rhaegal is a dragon and Aegon is maybe not a Targaryen, I think that could end up complicating things as well. Though with Nettles and other characters, there is some question of, oh, does it require Valyrian blood, or is it just a way to help out? Especially given the fact that regardless of his Targaryen parentage, Aegon is very likely Valyrian at the very least. Jon Snow was the other candidate, and as I said, this is kind of what happened in the show, though that really isn't a dragon bond, and I'm sure Martin has a lot of issues with it. Specifically, I really like the idea that Jon Snow could bond with Rhaegal as a kind of new familiar after Ghost's death. As he is dead currently in the books, it is likely that the way he is going to be resurrected is very different. Ghost is much closer to Jon in the books. There's this psychic warg connection between the two, and the prologue, the most recent book in the series, A Dance with Dragons, specifically deals with the Skin Changer's second life. Jon is a skin changer, and when a skin changer dies, typically their soul goes into their animal, the one that they're bonded to. Jon's last thought in his last chapter is Ghost, or I believe it's his last word, and it's very likely that his spirit goes into Ghost at the end of A Dance with Dragons. Ghost may have to be killed to release Jon's soul back to his human body, unless we just have Dog Jon for the rest of A Song of Ice and Fire, and I think it could very much make sense that once this Stark part of Jon's identity is killed, he could bond with a dragon and further embrace his Targaryen heritage. Super quick mini Danny Dragon ranking. Number 3, Drogon. Stupid name that I really don't like, and he hasn't done much yet. 2, Rhaegal. He's fine, I guess. Better name. Hasn't really done anything. Number 1, Viserion. He's adorable, and I love everything he does, and I hope he does more in the future and doesn't die. Goodbye. Viserion's a bit of a toss up. I think there are two potential camps into which Viserion's bonding could fall, and they're kind of Venn diagrams. I think that Viserion could fall to supernatural control, or he could be ridden by a Greyjoy. And I think Euron is the center of both of those. Dragonbinder is sitting in the middle of the Battle of Fire at this point. It's a magical, supposedly, Valyrian horn that is said to bind dragons to the will of the horn's owner. That owner is supposedly Euron, though Victarion is attempting to bond with it. And it is worth noting that Victarion has filled his hulls with pork from the Isle of Pigs. This will likely allow Viserion to feed and kind of become docile, and it could end with Viserion either bowing to Victarion via the dragon horn, or Victarion just kind of nettlesing himself into claiming Viserion. I really like this idea. Victarion is probably the dumbest viewpoint character, and giving this really stupid guy the equivalent to a nuclear bomb could just be really fun, and I think that would really create some interesting depth to his interactions in the Winds of Winter, if indeed he just survives the Battle of Fire. But just as likely, he could get barbecued after blowing the horn, or he could die from blowing the horn himself, and this could cause Viserion to either just go berserk, go away, or be claimed by the true owner of the dragon horn, that being Euron Greyjoy. I think Euron is much more likely in terms of a character who is going to claim Viserion, and I think that speaks to his overall role in the narrative. In the show, Viserion is killed and raised as a White Walker. It's hard to tell. It's got the glowing blue eyes, but it doesn't seem to be a White Walker because we see the little child be alive before it's turned. That's a sidebar. Never mind. But Viserion is changed by magic and taken over by an evil force. In the show, Euron is kind of evil, I guess, but he's not a magical force. Whereas in the show, I could very much see him being this supernatural element that ends up taking one of Daenerys' dragons out of her control. I think that's a much better direction for the narrative, though I do think that if the others were to control a dragon, it could be quite cool. But also, I feel like if they were to do that, it would be cooler if it was just an ice dragon. Come on, Martin, go back to your roots. You just mentioned it in this blog post. Let's see an ice dragon. I also think that Daenerys' bond with Drogon is going to be a key point of exploring her character in The Winds of Winter. She is someone who has grappled with what peace is and what it means to be a ruler for the entire series up until this point. Throughout A Dance with Dragons, she is striving to create this better world, which through any means she can, particularly compromising with often terrible people to try to make the world a better place in a realistic way. She has to navigate through these politics as she is queen, yes, but she's still just a person who's trying to get through like everybody else. Now, she's truly a Targaryen. She's embraced fire and blood and is truly a different person, and she's going to utilize the strength that her dragon provides in order to bend the world to her will and hopefully make it a better place, as I do not think that Daenerys is going to go mad in the Winds of Winter. But I do think we're going to see the effects of Drogon on her personality, as perhaps she'll begin to embody the dragon a bit more as the series goes on. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed the video, be sure to leave a like and subscribe, or else you'll wake the dragon. I'd love to hear your opinions on these theories and this post in the comments below. While you're down there, as I said, leave a like, subscribe. It's free. It really helps the channel, and I'll have many more A Song of Ice and Fire, Game of Thrones, House of the Dragon, Dunk and Egg, what have you, videos in the very near future. I'm excited for many of these ideas that I have. Next one should be a sequel to my Jon and Cersei videos, so get hyped for that. That actually might be in 2 videos time. I'm still scripting it, and it's taking longer than I expected, but it will be fun regardless. Goodbye, everyone. I will see you soon.